Authors Penny Avis and Jo Berry join you for Feel Fab Friday. I caught up with them earlier on and asked how much research they'd needed to do to paint a realistic picture of this industry.
Well, we had to do quite a lot because Penny and I obviously not from that background, and neither of us really knew anything at all about the cosmetic surgery business other than probably what the man in the street knows. So we did do quite a lot of research. We went online, we looked at lots of, the horror stories you can pick up on the internet, as well as sort of looking a bit more closely at some of the more positive stories, because obviously a lot of people have some very, very positive results from having cosmetic surgery. We also spoke to doctors who we knew who worked in that field, and Penny spent quite a lot of time with a doctor who works at Great Ormond Street. So we have actually spent quite a lot of time trying to get under the skin of the business and the kind of people that work there.
Cosmetic surgery is seen as quite glamorous, but actually the reality of it, with the bruising and the bleeding and all the rest of it, isn't that glamorous at all. It's just that it attracts quite glamorous people.
You're so completely right. It really isn't glamorous, and it's very, very hard work. Some of these are serious, proper procedures. I mean, when people go into hospital for other operations, they get lots of sympathy, they get visitors, everyone feels very worried about them because they're poorly. That is a sort of procedure, if you're going through something as major as a tummy tuck or breast augmentation, that people will go through. The recovery periods are quite long, and some of the worst stories actually that we found when we were doing our research was people whose recovery hadn't been managed properly, and they'd gone back to work either too quickly and then had found themselves sort of bleeding with open wounds in the office and all this sort of disaster, or they'd had it done abroad where there was very little support and follow-up for them, and so they ended up with a problem that way.
The books very much celebrate strong women across the series. Would you say it was stronger then to maybe take the pain and get the Botox, or do you think it's stronger to just embrace your wrinkles?
Wow, that's a good question. I think it's interesting because one of the things we uncovered was a difference in different generations' attitudes to cosmetic surgery, and I think perhaps perhaps Penny and I, being both of us are over 40 now, so I think we probably fall into the category of people who are still slightly unsure about the whole business and perhaps see having cosmetic surgery or Botox or fillers as possibly cheating slightly. Not to say that, I don't know many people of our age and above who do obviously have that kind of work done. I think younger women in their 20s, their attitude seems to be very much that it's about making the most of yourself, and if you're going to go and have facials, you're going to go and buy expensive face creams and go to the gym, then actually some of these procedures are just the next step, and logically, why wouldn't you? So going back to your question, I think perhaps women of that generation would see it as a strong, empowering thing to do, to go and make the most of yourself, whereas I think some other women, perhaps older women, might think, do you know what, you don't need any of that because you're strong and you are what you are without any additional enhancement. So it's a tough question to answer, really.
I don't know that there is an answer to it.
No.
I mean, there's been so much bad press surrounding cosmetic surgery, certainly over the last couple of weeks with the whole PIP scandal.
That's
and
right.
Not to mention, the fact that doctors and health experts are coming out and saying, look, we don't really know what Botox is going to do to us in 20 years' time. So it's all well and good, like, dropping by every 8 weeks to have your forehead lifted. You've got no idea what it's going to be like in 20, 30, 40 years down the line. Have you found out that the more you know, the less you would be inclined to have it done?
I think certainly what we found was that there are side effects to pretty much everything you could have a look at. I mean, even with Botox, one of the things that we discovered, and you might even have a look out for this if you're seeing people, is that when you've had Botox on your wrinkles around your eyes and in your forehead, your face, when it has to smile, still needs to move, and if the main centre of your face is frozen, then you can get a wrinkle that goes up and down horizontally on the side of your face, sort of by your ear, where your whole face is kind of moving up and down, and so you get very odd-looking wrinkles that don't look natural at all somewhere else. You can have Botox under your armpits to stop you sweating, which people have done for when they're in evening gowns or in their wedding dresses and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, the sweat still comes out of your body somewhere because it's a natural process. And so it appears somewhere else, like in the small of your back or other places that we don't even want to mention. And so you sort of can't quite get rid of some of these things all the time. It's quite funny.
It is quite funny, really, isn't it? And you've got to feel sorry for people who go into this thinking, I've read it in the magazine, it's what I'm going to have done, and not really realising that, the full-on physiological complications that come about as a result.
I think that's right, and I think it has become so much more accepted and part of the norm now that I think a lot of people perhaps are going into some of these procedures a little bit blithely without thinking about, the consequences we've just discussed. I mean, I think the other thing we did discuss is that the best practitioners and the best surgeons are the ones who will tell you about all of these. But obviously, there's some out there who aren't.
And one of the surgeons we spoke to, Neil Bulstrode, who's the surgeon from Great Ormond Street, is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon as well as a cosmetic surgeon, talked a lot about the fact that, it's about really assessing whether your patients are ready for this, and they work with psychologists and psychiatrists, and it's about looking at the whole person and deciding whether they're really ready for it and whether you're going to be happy to operate on them. When you're budgeting for these sorts of things, the other thing people forget is they budget for the one-off for the operation, and they don't budget for the fact that they're now sort of slightly in a process that they're going to need to look after as they go forward.
Penny Avis and Joe Berry joined you earlier on for Feel Fab Friday. I had a chat to them a bit earlier on today. They're two friends who have been friends for over 20 years. They've been on holidays together and they've seen each other get married and have children and what have you. They're also now writing books together. Penny's from a high-flying financial background. Joe's a lawyer with bags of blue-chip experience, but their series of novels is about getting a nip and tuck. I met them a bit earlier on and asked if the books are in any way autobiographical.
I think it's safe to say it's heavily drawn on both of our experiences, actually, from working on this type of project. We've had, long careers when we talked about it, with lots of laughs and funny stories and interesting characters. And so what we did is we sort of pieced those together and drew bits from some people and bits from stories and sort of created fictional characters out of them. Our sort of risk management brains worked out that we probably shouldn't copy anybody in their entirety.
Yeah, absolutely. Otherwise you might get a nasty letter through the post.
We might, indeed.
So there are 4 leading ladies in the Nevermind the Botox series. Where does Rachel fall?
She's our second. Our first book was Alex, the lawyer, who was out in June last year, and Rachel is the second in the series.
And there are another 2 to come.
That's right, yeah. We have Stella, who is the cosmetic surgeon, and Meredith, who is the banker.
The characters are all quite different, actually, and that was, quite deliberate. We wanted people to sort of see different sides of themselves, perhaps, or identify with different traits. And Rachel perhaps comes across as slightly younger, a little immaturer than the other 3 characters. Stella is a sort of working class girl made good from her cosmetic surgery background. She's done very well. And Meredith is a slightly ice queenish senior banker who's trying very hard to fulfill that role, but actually underneath is a little bit underconfident. Alex in the first book is planning to get married, and a lot of things happen to her on that journey when she's trying to organise her wedding. So they've all got sort of different things going on in their lives, and one of the things we tried to do was to make sure that it's a central story told from each of their 4 perspectives, and it has a very dramatic impact on them, but for very different reasons.
Can you read them in any order?
Yes, you can, yeah.
Well, that's always a good thing, isn't it? That you don't need to go back and catch up on something to read something else. And you must naturally gravitate more favourably to one character over another. Are there ones that you tend to like a bit more than others?
I think we both identify with the ones that are from our own professions, because those are probably the easiest for us to get under the skin of. But that said, we sort of tend to get in the moment of whichever book we are releasing, and so the 2 of us are hugely passionate about sort of Rachel at the moment, because we're talking about it, and I'm sure later in the year, once we're doing Stella, the 2 of us will sort of love the cosmetic surgeon in that moment, so we do sort of slightly drift between them.
How did you 2 meet and become friends and then eventually start writing together?
Well, Penny and I met a long time ago when we were in our early 20s through our husbands. Our husbands are both chartered accountants and trained together at one of the big firms in London, and they were then our boyfriends, not our husbands, and Penny and I met through them. And since then, I think we first started getting to know each other really well when we started going on a series of holidays together. I think we went to Tobago 3 times in a row in sort of the mid-90s before we'd had children. And then, ironically, we now go on holiday every year, but with between us 5 children, so it's a very different kind of holiday from the holiday we had in our 20s. But yes, we've been friends for a very, very long time.
I was going to say, holidays in Tobago, definitely life before children.
Definitely.
Do you find that you come home with just a tan from the waist up where you've been stood in the pool for 2 weeks?
With a cocktail in your hand.
Yeah, well, there is always that, absolutely. So how about working together and carrying on with your family lives and your working roles and what have you? How do you find the time to write a book?
I know it is hard, and one of the truisms about books is the biggest challenge to write a book is actually just to finish. The amount of people who will say that they are writing a book, thinking about writing a book, but haven't actually got a completed manuscript, and until you have a completed manuscript, you have no product. And so that really is the biggest challenge, was for the two of us to actually agree that we were going to do it and finish. And so the two of us sat down and had a long discussion, and both of us agreed that we would commit to finishing the series. And then it's actually been really, really good fun. We've had more laughs and done some of the strangest things and been to weird meetings and weird places and lovely parties and all sorts of things that's happened that we wouldn't have done had we never have embarked on it. So absolutely no regrets doing it with somebody else. In fact, I don't think we could have created this product, either of us individually, because it has so much knowledge from the two of us in it.
Well, that's what friends are for. Penny Avis and Joe Berry then chatting earlier on BBC Radio Solent about part 2 of the Never Mind the Botox series. It's out in paperback now.